Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome to, I think this is episode 83. We're talking about creating rapport amongst team members, and I have with me Joey Sanchez. Joey, welcome to the show.
Hello, Miss Watts. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get started tonight, Joey, with you telling our audience a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what your aspirations are.
Sure. Well, I've been in education for 12 years. I was a teacher for 7 years. I'm going into my 5th year of being an assistant principal thus far. All of my experience in the workforce in education has taken place here in the Rio Grande Valley. So I have taught in multiple districts in Region 1. And currently, as I stated before, I'm going into my 5th year of administration here at Veterans Memorial Academy in San Benito, Texas. So we are a 9th grade academy here in the South Texas region.
Yeah, awesome. And before I pressed go live, we were talking about what your next steps are. And I'd love for you to share with the audience what you shared with me, because I asked you, what are your plans in the future? Moving forward, what does that look like for you?
Right. So my plans are simply, I like to refer back to a quote, which is keep the main thing the main thing. And so heading into the school year, I think that a lot of individuals, educators, probably not just in education, but just in general in the workforce, is always to climb the ladder and such. Okay. My goal specifically is just to become the best assistant principal that I can be going into my 5th year. Okay. I want to be the best version of myself, and that's it. So, like I was telling you a little bit beforehand, yeah, I do want to be a principal sometime in the future. When is that time going to come about? I don't know. I'm not worried about that per se, but I do want to make sure that I continue to grow my skills, because you know what? There is so much to learn in the field of education, especially being an AP. You have your hands in so many pots. And I think it's very, very much necessary to learn a little bit about everybody's job. Okay. Because once I do become that leader, say, for example, if I were to become a principal and I get a young inexperienced assistant principal, I can teach them those skill sets, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully they can be better than me.
Yeah, man, I love that so much. And I wish there were so many more people out there with that mindset, because, like what we were talking about earlier, and you said it, people find themselves trying to climb the ladder, ready to get to the next position, the next position, the next position. But I often find that what happens sometimes is, in trying to get to that next position and trying to climb the next rung of the ladder, we get there and we don't have the knowledge or experience or expertise that we need to be able to lead well. It's like climbing the ladder for climbing the ladder's sake. And if that's the case, not only we're putting ourselves in a bind, but we're putting the people that we're leading in a bind too. So definitely kudos to you for taking on that mindset. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if I take nothing else away from this conversation, this is what I'm taking away from that conversation. because it's so important. And I want to note too, assistant principals, I don't think they get enough pats on the back. I don't think that we give them enough credit because you're right. Their hands are in so many different pots. So, can you tell a little bit? This is not really even about our conversation, but I want to ask you, like, what that looks like in your role. Like, what are all of the different things that you feel like assistant principals have to juggle?
Right. So I think I can lean a little bit on my experience from last year in 2023. So there are a total of at my current campus there are a total of two assistant principals, and one of them was on maternity leave. And I had just been transitioned to this new position, and so taking on the brunt of that work, I almost felt a little bit like a compliance clerk. So getting to know a brand new staff, right? Trying to develop that rapport, establish that communication, have them feel comfortable. But on the opposite side, to essentially to answer your question, taking care of 504 paperwork, sped paperwork, LPAC coordinator, testing, complete monster, attendance on a daily basis, safety and security, getting to know the platform and the entryways and blind spots of every nuance of the campus, getting ready for, how should I say it, the audits that we were going to have for every single little thing that you can think of. It was essentially being thrown into the fire. So even though I was familiar with the programs, this is getting familiar with the nuances of the organization in of itself. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It can be overwhelming. My recommendation is for people just to go ahead and take it on a daily basis. Okay, the work is going to be there regardless. You just take it day by day and by day. Try to establish relationships and try to communicate with people when you can, and just do your best and don't sweat the rest.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Okay, well, then, speaking of relationships, that's what our topic is tonight. And when we actually met at a conference in San Antonio. And I told the audience, I said, listen, I would love to have you guys on my podcast because I really do enjoy having people who are out in the field, because I think like, you're in the trenches, you have so much knowledge and expertise to bring to these conversations, and it's so relatable to our audience who's listening. And you reached out to me almost immediately and knew exactly what you wanted to talk about. And when you sent me the information, you said, I want to talk about creating rapport amongst team members. And so that's what we're discussing tonight. And I want to ask you to start. What do you think is important in building rapport among team members? I can tell already that that's something that's really important to you. How do you do that? What are the elements that are necessary?
I think especially going into a new organization is just essentially to do the opposite of what we are doing right now. In other words, just listen. Take a step back and listen to what people have to say.
Mhm.
So people are resistant to change as it is, right? Okay, and it can be difficult for somebody brand new to a campus and such, or brand new to a new role and things of that nature. So I think it's important just to slow things down just a bit and listen. The answers will come to you at that point of time. And so also listen to your number one, your principal, your supervisor in charge, and see what can come from them and how they want you to go ahead and disseminate that information. But essentially, don't lose the characteristics that make you you. Be approachable, be respectful of everybody's time, because at the end of the day, you, myself, we're not just educators. Okay, we're also mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, people that have other things to do on their free time, and you want to respect that time. You always want to make sure that you are transparent and you streamline that communication. Be in the hallways, be in the trenches with your teachers. There's no difference between you and I. Okay, we are on the front lines and we are right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's something that we take for granted, like these, even with the little moments that we have to be able to listen. Like, I think so
Mhm.
often when leaders, like, we hear people talk about, you have to listen, be sure that you're building those relationships. And we make it out to be this bigger, unattainable thing than it has to be, when really Like there are so many passing moments where you can step back and listen. And remembering like to humanize this profession that
Right.
we have is so important. Yeah. So, what is an example of like a team that you feel like on your campus or a team that you've worked with where a strong rapport has been established?
Right. So I think I would relate back to my experience at the middle school level. So I was there for about 2 years and such. And so when I had first gotten there, there was a this campus was already an A-rated campus and even blue ribbon distinguished. So they had a lot of nuances and they had a lot of structures and routines that were already built in place. However, taking a step back and listening a little bit more, a lot of those routines and practices had gotten lost in translation of having so many new admin teams.
Yeah.
And so it became very important to make sure that our teachers who were very well distinguished, very adept, to go ahead and involve them in on the conversation, involve them in on the conversation, and have them guide you just a little bit. And they would share items and they would share experiences of how things were done. And so essentially what had been very strong in the past, we had just some minor issues with student behavior and which affected student performance. So again, scaling back, I think the number one thing to always remember is that to affect student performance, you got to invest in your teachers. That's the number one thing. Okay, invest in your cream of the crop, and so take a step back. You listen to them, and then you perform. You follow up in implementing those with action.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is going to speak volumes to their trust in you. And you're going to see the effects of that, not just among the team, but in their classrooms as well. You know, um, you kind of talked a little bit about like challenges that teams face. What are challenges that you feel like keep a leader from maintaining continuity, and how can they overcome that?
I think that in today's contemporary time, because one thing I will say is that I was a teacher for several years, and then I transitioned into the administration role during the COVID time. So that was an experience in of itself. But one thing that I've caught on to, and I'm kind of learning, is that education. A lot of people are leaving education, unfortunately. I feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of turnover in education, and it can be a great profession if it's if we invest in it, right?
Yeah.
And again, people want to talk about external factors and things of that sort, but again, we have to control what we can control. And so when it comes to change, people are very resistant to it because it just feels like it's more work. You're adding onto my plate, and this isn't going to work anymore. So again, to answer your question, I think is just making sure that when change is involved, do it in increments. Okay,
Mhm.
don't pull the plug, don't yank the rug from what people are used to doing. We're just trying to find ways to accentuate and make things a little bit better. But we're going to do so in a very controlled way where, again, it's not going to be necessarily bothersome to a lot of people. And again, you have to maintain that communication with people, not just through email or one-way communication. Be there for them and involve that two-way communication.
Yeah. And it sounds a lot like one of the things you try to do is be really transparent with your staff. Um, so when we're thinking about change, one of the number one things that causes overwhelm and stress and burnout is actually a lack of clarity and a lack of transparency from leadership, or I guess as to say, like a lack of communication. And again, it's just there are simple ways to maintain that communication face to face with your people just by listening and then responding with, here is the small increment of change that we're implementing, and here's why we're doing it. What benefits do you think we're going to see because of this minor change? And I find too, if we can approach it in that way where we're asking them, what are the benefits you see in the future of us implementing this, then it prevents them from focusing so much on the negative, and allows opportunity for them to be a part of the positive piece of that conversation instead of focusing so much on the negative.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, with that said, when we're thinking about like resistance, we're thinking about building rapport with teams, there still has to be a balance with like the flexibility to adapting to change. So how do you help them find like how do we find that balance um for consistency and flexibility at the same time?
I think it can be easy for a lot of campus leaders to become discouraged or to kind of wean off and just, you know what, let me just send this out via email and things of that sort. Again, going into my 5th year, I'll say it like this. I've had an opportunity to learn. Hey, some things I've learned, you're going to be around some good experiences, maybe some bad experiences. Regardless, you're going to learn. What I've learned is this, that you need to keep your axe to the grindstone and you can't give up on your teachers. Okay.
Mhm.
Regardless, there's going to be some resistance. Just understand that's the nature of the beast right there. Okay.
Yeah.
That does not mean that you shy away from PLCs and faculty meetings. Hey, you get involved. Okay. Uh, Talk to your teachers, have a segment where you have your admin team updates during a PLC session. That way, teachers understand what is coming forth from the campus as well as district initiatives, things of that nature. And the hope is that teachers will, faculty and staff members will see you more as open, honest, and willing to hit the ground running as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're holding them accountable. And whether people want to admit it or not, we want to be held accountable. It's what helps us to show up for the work and to know that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves is someone's there saying, this is what we're working toward. Okay, we're going to go at it together. And this is what the expectation is. So I love that you pointed out, like, yes, there are going to be challenges. Yes, there is going to be some resistance, but guess what? We're in it, and this is what the expectation is. And I think probably more often than not, people are going to respect and value that rather than to be resistant to it. Now, yes, always going to have your resistant people, but I find that that's a handful of people most often. And I also find that if we don't hold people accountable, that small group of people, because it's a negative, um, toxic culture, it just tends to permeate if we allow it to permeate. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I think primarily you just need to make sure that you continue making deposits.
Yeah.
And sometimes from when you were having that discussion just now, I started thinking about, well, you know what? Some of those people who can be negative and such, those are sometimes the people that end up dropping by the office most oftentimes. And you know what? Those are just opportunities to have that establish that rapport with them and continue letting them know, like, hey, we're trying to do this. This is a rhyme and reason as to what we are trying to do. Work with us. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, we're human too. At the end of the day, we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Okay. But essentially, we are in this together. There is no you versus me. Sometimes it can be admin is on one side and teachers on the other. Look, this is just, hey, like a little PNB J sandwich. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And essentially, just by having a listening ear, I guarantee you, you're gonna find answers to probably some things that you didn't know you needed answers to.
Yeah. Yeah. So in when I'm teaching about the clarity cycle framework, one of the things that I talk about heavily is there is strategy, but then without clarity, we will not move forward. So essentially, strategy cannot exist without clarity. And it sounds like that's kind of one of the things that you are thinking about is yeah, we can have strategy for the things that we're going to implement, like our PLCs or district initiatives, et cetera. But if we haven't figured out how we're going to help our people gain clarity around those things and the steps to get there, then we might as well be leaving them in the rearview mirror. They're not going to be ready to follow with us. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I think one thing that I've gained also from this conversation, other than thinking about like, be the best where you are right now, the other thing that I keep hearing you say is listen. Just listen and open your ears to what people have to say, but then be ready to say with clarity, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're going to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think probably the next step that comes with it. I know if I haven't said it I've at least alluded to it, is to always make sure that you follow up. Okay,
Ooh.
people have questions for me, and guess what? I don't have all the answers, but
Mhm.
that does not mean that I leave them as such. I go and I find the answers, and I try to relay, if not to them, the entire team. And it's okay. I've learned to learn that it's okay to be wrong, and
Yeah.
as long as you try your best to rectify those mistakes, that's what establishes that rapport and takes it to another level.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're showing them a very human side of you. And I think it makes it possible for them to be okay with being vulnerable themselves
Mhm.
and being okay with making the mistakes and then owning up to it and then taking risks to try again when something hasn't worked out. There was something else that you said that I wanted to touch on, and I think it was like really casting a vision regularly. So one thing that I think we tend to do as leaders is we feel like if we've said it, that we shouldn't have to say it again. Or if we've explained it once, they're adults, they should understand, like, I already explained that, or they know why we're doing this. But it sounds like what you're saying is no, we have to continuously cast a vision for whatever it is that we're working toward. And then we have to be open to the many questions that are going to come, not just in the here and now, but in the future as well. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And so one thing I like to tell myself, because I've been a coach as well, is that if I say something, it might go top of your head and such. So I used to tell my staff, don't tell me that you told the kid, "Hey, well, I told him, I told him."
Yes.
No, did you emphasize it? Did you emphasize it with your kids? Same thing goes for staff members. Sometimes it happens to me too. Hey, we're
Right.
adults. We got a lot of things to juggle. Like I said, like I was telling you in the beginning, they're not just educators. They're parents. They have other things that they're worried about. Maybe somebody had a bad day, is not listening. That's okay. But continue to emphasize that message. Harp on, I would say, probably take a step back and harp on a few number of things as opposed to a whole list of things. Because you know what? Just by harping on 2 to 3 or 4 items, you're probably really getting through that facet. And by
Yeah.
doing less, you're doing more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. So I am a fan of all things Andy Stanley, who is a leadership coach, thought leader around leadership. And he always talks about how when you think you've said it enough, you've only just begun. And it's so true. If we keep the main thing, and it's continuously coming out of us, not only through our words, but in our actions, then the message will be relayed to staff. And really, I want one day for people that I lead to be able to say, um, when I step away, when I'm no longer there, I want what I have said to be imitated in their thoughts, in their language, and in their actions. Something as simple as, like, I say it probably too often, but there's growth and discomfort. And so I say it so much that I start to hear people say, well, I know what you're going to say. I know you're going to say there's growth and discomfort. And I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me that they are repeating things almost sometimes it could feel like a mocking way. That's fine with me because it means that I've gotten the message across that there is growth and discomfort. And that's one of the things that we are going to be doing when we work together. We're going to get uncomfortable together. So it's just an expectation, like they know it, they expect it when they work with me. And I think that's something for us to be proud of, is when we can cast vision so much so that our people are starting to show it in their words and actions.
Right. I love that so much. I had to write it down. So there's growth and discomfort. Mine would be the more I learn, the less I know. There's always information out there to go ahead and pick up on. And I mean, this is my going into my fourth year. This is the first time I've ever touched base on cheer. So that was something I had to oversee. But guess what? I learned a little bit more, and I'm very thankful for it. And I guarantee you, going into my fifth year, there's going to be something that catches me off guard, and just like everybody else, just like we expect everybody else, and we have to do it together. We just try to do our absolute best, research and ask questions, and continue to come up with the right answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a great place to start to wrap up. And I would love for you to share with our audience, number one, what you would hope they take away most from our conversation tonight, but also, is there like social media that they can find you on? How might someone connect with you?
Right. So speaking on social media, on Instagram, my Instagram is @Joey Sanchez. You can also find me on Facebook as well, Joey Sanchez as well. What I hope that anybody takes away from this conversation is essentially, sometimes you can do a little, by doing a little bit less, you're doing more. Okay. Continue to focus on minuscule focus of items, and then continue on with that. Make sure that you are not trying to move at such a fast pace. You lose yourself. Sometimes it's best to scale back, listen, and then proceed forth. The work will always be there for you when you come back. Just understand that you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to have great experiences. You're going to have good experiences and bad experiences. Regardless, you will learn from it, and you're going to grow. So get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I love it so much. That's so great. Joey, thank you so much for being a part of this show tonight. And guys, I want to tell you, so Joey is an assistant principal. He's in the thick of it. If you are someone who has a message, you have experience, you have something to share. I promise you, you have something to share. So don't think that you don't have anything to share. This is not a scary process. I would love to interview more people who are in the field. So if you're an assistant principal, if you are a principal, if you are an instructional coach or instructional specialist, you are someone who works with teams of any sort, I want to have you on the show, because on the show, that's what we talk about, building cohesive, vision-driven teams. So Joey, thank you for being an example of that tonight.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me, Mrs. Watts.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys. We'll catch you on the flip side. Hey there. Thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends, and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.